Since the release of the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer, a lot of questions have been on my mind. Yes, Sony and Marvel have managed to make this movie extremely enigmatic and honestly hard to figure out. There are so many things in these few clips that I still can't figure out where the events of this new day are really taking us. Ninjas, telepaths, a Punisher fresh off his chaotic special, and even a Hulk. All of this in a dark movie that's supposed to lead its characters to secret wars without going through Doomsday. And to be honest, that's where my brain gets really tangled up. Why wouldn't Peter Parker be in Doomsday? Why does he go straight to Secret Wars? Well, what if I told you it's maybe because his movie actually takes place after Doomsday? Yeah, okay, you're probably thinking, what is this crazy guy talking about now? And to be honest, I also think it's pretty crazy. But you know, I love diving back into old insider reports that everyone has forgotten. And Spider-Man Brand New Day went through a chaotic development process, with numerous rewrites and release dates that kept changing. First before Doomsday, then after, then before again. All of this happened against the backdrop of a Marvel-Sony war over a simple question: should the movie be multiversal or not? So yes, all of this is old news. The movie has now been filmed. We got an awesome trailer that nearly made us forget the chaos behind the scenes, but now a new element is shaking things up. The American cinema chain Regal just published a synopsis in which they claim that the movie takes place after Doomsday. So, is it just a simple mistake by the theater chain or a huge blunder? That's what we're going to look into in this theory video. That's why we're now entering the spoiler zone, the danger zone. You're with Kevin Buchart, your favorite theorist's favorite theorist. Intro. A chaotic production. Spider-Man Brand New Day was officially unveiled a year ago at CinemaCon in Las Vegas. Sony and Destin Daniel Cretton presented the film's title there, as well as the intentions and ambitions of the project. It was a way for the studio to reassure both fans and theater owners by showing that everything was going well for the return of Tom Holland as Peter Parker. However, the months leading up to this presentation were much quieter, chaotic even, starting with the disagreements between Sony and Marvel. Well, that's nothing new. Since 2016, the year when the two studios agreed to introduce Spider-Man into the MCU, Sony has produced the Spider-Man films, but Kevin Feige still has a say over the character. As a hero in the MCU roster, Sony can't just do whatever they want with Peter Parker. Yet, on many occasions, the two studios have shown major blunders that have directly impacted their productions, starting with Homecoming and its huge timeline mistake. Sony set the movie 8 years after Avengers, which makes absolutely no sense. Then, there are the many red herrings in the SSU, like the Spider-Man reference in the Morbius trailer, even though Spider-Man never actually appears in the movie, or that completely lame scene with Michael Keaton. Then there was Madame Web 2, which was originally supposed to revolve around baby Peter Parker, but Marvel always refused, forcing Sony to rewrite the entire script and turn it into this thing. Not to mention the ongoing effort to bring Venom into the MCU, only for Kevin Feige to quickly return him to the SSU. In short, it's a complicated relationship that's nearly ended several times, with both sides threatening to walk away. That's also what pushed Tom Holland to get much more involved in the production so he could have a say in all these disputes. This actually delayed the start of a new Spider-Man movie by several years. Because yes, Tom Holland, aware of the criticism surrounding his first trilogy and deeply attached to his character, wants to make sure that this new trilogy finally brings out the best in Spider-Man. Starting with the choice of director. While he was originally supposed to direct Avengers 5, which was then called Kang Dynasty, Destin Daniel Cretton was ultimately imposed by Disney to take the helm of this new Spider-Man trilogy. Sony, on their side, were at that time very satisfied with Jon Watts, who, with his last two Spider-Man movies, had just delivered the studio's two biggest hits. Including, of course, No Way Home, which brought in nearly $2 billion, this naturally made the studio want to go even further. Further and further. But into what? Well, into the multiverse and tons of cameos. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Because the last real argument between the studios was precisely about the theme of this Spider-Man 4. Tom Holland and the Marvel teams wanted to bring Spider-Man back to his street-level roots, refocus Peter on New York, on the streets, on more human threats. But Sony, on their side, mainly insisted on another idea. Making money. Oh, how strange. Oh, so that's why, for several weeks, the insiders were coming out with a new version of the movie every week. One project was 100% street level, another was a movie, a 100% multiversal film, and in the end, they found a compromise. A movie that's mainly street level, with a touch of multiverse. But for several weeks now, no one has been talking about this multiversal aspect anymore. No one until that famous description appeared on the Regal Theatre Group's website. On their website, at the time I'm writing this video, you can read, after Doomsday, Peter Parker tries to focus on college and leaves Spider-Man behind. But when a new threat puts his friends in danger, he has to break his promise and put the suit back on, teaming up with an unexpected ally to protect those he loves. Absolute shock. Why? Because this pitch has absolutely nothing to do with the one presented during the release of the first trailer. As a reminder, here is the one that officially accompanied the trailer. 4 years have passed since we last saw our friendly neighborhood Spider at the end of No Way Home. Peter Parker is gone, but Spider-Man is at the top of his game, keeping New York safe. Things are going very well for our anonymous hero, who has devoted himself 100% to protecting the city, until a series of unusual crimes draws him into a mystery bigger than anything he has faced so far. Moreover, as the demands of his mission intensify, the pressure triggers a surprising and potentially dangerous physical change that threatens his very existence. To face what lies ahead, Spider-Man will not only have to be at the top of his game, but he will also have to prepare to confront the consequences of his past. Well, as you saw, it has absolutely nothing to do with it, so why would this theater be using that synopsis? Well, I'm not going to pretend to lead you on a false trail just to make my point. This synopsis is based on the first leaked information about the movie. When a movie starts production, it shows up in professional registries. Especially Production Weekly, one of the best known. It's a registry where you can see each week the movies that are going into production and that will often be released 1 or 2 years later. And in fact, in October 2024, a few months after Comic-Con announced Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, a note appears regarding Spider-Man 4. The movie had indeed already been announced as in development by Sony a few days earlier, but this note contained several very interesting pieces of information. First, the title. While it won't be made official until several months later, the mention of Spider-Man Brand New Day appears here. Secondly, the filming dates from May to October 2025. Which in a way makes sense since it's a production note, but let's get back to our pitch. You can clearly see that the theater simply took the synopsis from this production sheet and slightly adapted it. In other words, this text might not come from recent information, but from an old internal document dating back to the very beginning of the film's development. However, when we read further, we see that the report tells us that Andrew Garfield, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, and also Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom will be in the movie. Which is completely crazy, knowing that at the time, production was about to start. But then, a real question remains. Can the movie, despite everything, really take place after Doomsday? A movie that's so multiversal. As I was saying, the next Spider-Man has experienced a lot of delays, due to disagreements between Sony, Marvel and Tom Holland. These delays have made things much more complicated for the screenwriters. The movie was initially set to release before Avengers Doomsday, then after due to delays, and now again before Doomsday following the latest Avengers delay. In short, a real headache, both for the teams and for the fans. Because at the time, the question on everyone's mind was simple. How do you balance street level and multiversal? As I said, the pitch mentioning following the events of Doomsday made sense then, since the movie was supposed to release immediately after. So yes, we can totally debunk that info, since the theater would have just recycled an old, outdated sheet. But that doesn't stop us from seriously asking the question, what if the movie actually took place after Doomsday? We need to take this production note from 1.5 years ago with caution, but now we see the title and production dates were accurate. The pitch might have just been changed for the release schedule, but what about another, even crazier detail? As I was saying, according to this note, the film's cast would include Andrew Garfield, Michael Keaton, and Robert Downey Jr. And when I read this information over and over again, I can't help but think of that comment I see under every one of my videos about the film, especially regarding the presence of Jean Grey. What would a mutant be doing in a Spider-Man movie? After denying for a long time that it was strange, you might actually be right. By connecting the clues, a theory could emerge. Let's revisit the idea of a direct transition from Brand New Day to Secret Wars. So, there could be a lot of explanations about how, at the very least, Peter and Jean would end up in Doom's world without even having fought alongside the Avengers. But when you look more closely, the 4 main characters in the movie all have one thing in common. They are isolated heroes. Peter has no one left, Banner doesn't really have any ties with the Avengers anymore, we don't know where Punisher will end up after his special, but he also seems isolated, and Sadie comes out of nowhere with mutant abilities. 4 characters who are powerful enough, and above all, far enough removed to disappear without anyone immediately looking for them. And in a previous video, I already suggested the idea that Jean Grey would be important in Secret Wars to restore the heroes' memories and start a rebellion against Doom. Well, what if I told you that all of this has already started? After the Avengers Doomsday teasers were released, the Russo brothers posted this enigmatic message. Doomsday has already begun for you, us, the fans. implying that Doom's plan won't start on December 16, 2026, but that a scene might already be right in the middle of it. So it could be that this dark and grey Manhattan we see in the trailer isn't the real world, but a projection or a part of Battleworld. Or even a simulation like Wanda did with Westview, and that Sadie, thanks to her powers, is the only one who knows the truth, which would push her to look for allies, like the Punisher for example. And if I take it even further, Frank Castle would then be, as often in the comics, an outsider in a world dominated by heroes much more powerful than him. He would know the truth and would become Jean's bodyguard. Peter, however, would see his body evolve to survive in this new world. His mind might then be affected by the spell or the change, but not his spider sense, which would go haywire and make his body evolve. As for Banner, also trapped in this simulation, he would transform the moment Sadie tried to restore his memory, awakening not only the dormant part, but especially the monster within him. Now the question is whether this is just a test Doom set up before creating the Grand Battle World, or if it's actually a region of Battle World, making the movie set after Doomsday. That's the main question. He might have removed these characters before attacking the 616, or this could be after Doomsday. We'll find out either way. Because yes, Peter is going to face enhanced criminals, ninjas, and a whole bunch of other threats that at first glance have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But really, who is the main villain of the movie? Hulk? Sadie? Peter himself? And what if, deep down, everything was already in that famous production sheet, the infamous Dr. Doom? And what if, in reality, the end of the movie was totally crazy? What if all the clues scattered throughout the story, those strange elements, those details that seem off, were actually there to make us realize that the movie really takes place in Battleworld of God Emperor Doom? Let me remind you that the report stated that RDJ and Andrew Garfield would appear in the movie. Now, as I mentioned, I have a feeling that Andrew will have an important role in Secret Wars, directly opposing Peter. Possibly with the black suit on Doom's side. And what if the end of the movie didn't wrap up like a classic ending, but was actually a true part 1? What if Brand New Day was actually a prequel to Secret Wars? Sure, but also a real teaser for Doomsday, a movie that would actually show us the very first appearance of Doom. So yeah, I know, it's completely crazy. But it would also be a great way for the studios to solve their street level versus multiversal conflict. And on top of that, you can add a bunch of little clues left in the past. A real reboot for Spidey. Now that we've tried to understand how the multiverse could tie into this story, we need to go back a bit and sift through the dozens of insider reports to see if all of this really holds up. Sure, the movie has had plenty of twists and turns, but like in any investigation, some clues can sometimes make a theory more or less plausible. It's often been said that making RDJ the new Doctor Doom, the big villain at the end of the multiverse, will have a huge impact on the heroes, but one of the most affected by Tony Stark's death is still Peter. And his announced absence in Doomsday deprives us of a confrontation between a lost Peter and his former mentor returned from the dead. And personally, I have a hard time imagining their first exchange when Doom will already be sitting on his throne like a true god. No. I think Brand New Day can already play on our emotions by introducing this new antagonist, and what makes me say that comes from an old report by My Time to Shine. In May 2024, 2 years ago indeed, he indicated that Marisa Tomei could return in her role as Aunt May. Which doesn't really make sense since she was killed by the Green Goblin in No Way Home, and we clearly see Peter at her grave in the trailer. But Brand New Day takes its title directly from the run that follows One More Day. As a reminder, in this run, Peter and MJ make a pact with Mephisto. They act as if their marriage never happened in exchange for Aunt May's life, and so Brand New Day starts with a soft reboot where Peter is no longer with MJ and May is indeed alive. Alongside Harry, by the way, who had also died a few years earlier. We later learned that Mephisto simply traveled back in time to make Peter late for his own wedding, cancelling the ceremony and causing a butterfly effect that erases many events. Alright, now let's imagine we replace Mephisto with another iconic villain, Doom. Let's try to piece things together. We have a Peter who, as Alex Perez mentioned, is about to live the worst week of his life. A series of trials cleverly orchestrated by Doom to break him in a fictional world. Created by him. But Sadie woke him up. Peter now knows that none of this is real. Doom could then, using the face of his former mentor, try to tempt Peter. Explain to him that if he joins him, if he agrees to embrace this new life, he could get back everything he lost. MJ, May, everything. But why would Doom be interested in Peter? First of all, just like with Sadie or Hulk, it's better to get rid of his threats before launching his big plan against the 616. But also because Peter, just like Strange, has caused a lot of incursions in the multiverse. And according to several insiders, Doom is actually after those heroes who helped set this chaos in motion. Starting with Strange, who will surely be involved through Clea, but also Steve, who decided to stay in the past with Peggy, not to mention Wanda, who is probably already helping him. All characters who have tampered with the multiverse and are therefore partly responsible for the problem. So Doom could exploit their guilt and manipulate them to push them into becoming his allies. This could create one of the most interesting scenes between RDJ and Tom Holland, making Peter and Sadie Sink the first rebels in the shadows of Secret Wars. Because some rumors mention a Peter who goes missing or even dies at the end of the movie, what if he refused to be corrupted by Doom by faking his death in his battle world in order to act from the shadows? Then, with Sadie, they would become Secret Wars key characters, the ones who begin everything. By the way, Marvel seems to be keeping the actual dates when each movie takes place very secret to create confusion. The idea is to make sure we never really know when anything is happening. When they know it very well themselves, of course, but that could explain why this movie would take place afterwards. Tom Holland also explained that some reshoots were planned for the film. No exact date, but it looks like they will happen around Doomsday. This would be an opportunity for him either to shoot a small post-credits scene or to film 2 or 3 scenes with RDJ directly for his own movie. In short, as you can see, this theory is completely crazy. I'm not even sure I believe it myself, but there are clues. So, anything is possible. This movie was probably the most secretive in the MCU. We still don't know Sadie Sink's role, and it's nearly impossible to predict how this will end. Whatever happens, there have been so many rumors, including rumors about Shatra, who has often been described as a multiversal character. One thing is certain, Spider-Man is now Marvel's most powerful IP, and its trailer broke all records by surpassing 1 billion views. I can't see Marvel missing this opportunity to capitalize on that visibility, especially since this is their only film to launch Avengers Doomsday with fanfare this year. What do you think? Am I completely crazy, or do you think it's a real possibility? Tell me in the comments if you think this movie takes place before or after Doomsday. Did the writers change things after the Avengers were postponed, or have they stayed on the same path from the start? I'm genuinely interested in your thoughts. For new viewers, I analyze and theorize weekly about pop culture, especially Marvel and DC. If you enjoyed this, subscribe. Once again, a huge thank you to Displayed for sponsoring this video, but most of all, for pimping out my studio, which is really starting to look awesome. If you also want to enhance your home with your passions or give an extraordinary gift to someone close to you, just use the link in the description and enter the promo code Kevin Beckhardt at checkout. To get 26% off when you buy 1 Displayed, 31% off when you buy 2 Displays, or even 36% off when you buy 3 Displays. Just a reminder, the promotion doesn't apply to limited editions. It's stylish, easy to install, and honestly, I'm really happy with it. I'll see you next Sunday at 4 PM for a new video, and if you're interested in the topic, you can check out this video where I talk about the heroes who will or won't be in the future MCU. In the meantime, don't forget to stay curious, it's the secret to being happy. Bye.